Today's webinar will be Accounting Firm Tech and Management Trends, being presented by Brian Tankersley. My name is Div Bensali. I'm with AccountantsWorld, and I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us today. I want to remind you that you can download today's presentation directly from the GoToWebinar panel. Simply click on the panel, open up the tab that says Handouts, and you'll see a PDF there of Brian's presentation so you can follow along. A couple of other tips on how to use GoToWebinar. To expand or hide the attendee control panel, just use that orange arrow. Audio options, you can choose to listen in via telephone or via computer speakers. So simply toggle to whatever you'd like under the audio tab, and if you select telephone, you'll receive an access number and code to be able to dial in. If you have any questions at any point during the presentation for Brian, simply expand the question section, type in your question, and make sure to click send to have it sent to Brian. Brian will be answering some questions during the presentation, and we'll stick around for a few minutes afterwards as well to address questions. And then finally, as I mentioned before, the slide deck handouts can be found under the Handouts tab. We do offer one CP for this webinar today, and it's based on active participation during the live presentation. Active participation means responding to all the poll questions in the webinar, completing the survey at the end of the webinar, and being logged into the event for a minimum of 50 minutes. In terms of the post-webinar survey, that should launch as soon as you close your webinar window at the end, but we'll also send a link to you via email afterwards in case you don't see it. So if you don't see it, don't worry, you'll get a link in our follow-up email. CPA certificates will typically mail to you within 2 to 3 days after eligibility has been confirmed. Today is the latest presentation in the 2016 Expert Webinar Series. I believe this is number 7 or 8 on the year. After Brian today, we have 2 more presentations. Joel Sinkin will be presenting in just under 2 weeks on Tuesday, November 15th. His topic is making your firm more attractive to a successor firm or to a firm merging up. And then finally, on December 8th, we wrap up this year's Expert Webinar Series with Rick Telberg from CPA Trendlines. He'll be presenting 101 ways to make 2017 your best busy season ever. A brief word about our sponsor, AccountantsWorld. AccountantsWorld is the pioneer in cloud computing solutions for accountants, and I should actually say for over 15 years at this point. We like to say that we have been pioneering cloud computing solutions for longer than the term cloud computing has existed. The centerpiece of what we have to offer, we have an entire suite of solutions, and the integrated bundle is called the Power Practice System. Power Practice System includes cloud solutions for virtually everything you need for your practice. It includes solutions for bookkeeping, write-up, trial balance, document management, client portals, practice management, a website builder, after-the-fact payroll, and more. Then we also offer Payroll Relief, which is the leading payroll processing solution exclusively for accountants. Whether you're currently offering payroll processing or not, Payroll Relief can help deliver significantly higher profits to your firm by automating virtually every step of payroll processing. And the measurable results you can expect by using AccountantsWorld solutions are better control over your core services, especially accounting and payroll, the ability to work much more collaboratively with your clients than you can right now, and being able to achieve higher profits in fewer hours. If you'd like to learn more about our solutions and sign up for webinars specifically about our accounting and payroll solutions, please visit accountantsworld.com. And at this time, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Brian Tankersley.
All right, well, thank you, Deb. I appreciate it, and thank you, everybody, for joining me today. Welcome. I hope you're all having a beautiful day on this nice fall day. First off, let me just kind of introduce myself. My name is Brian Tankersley. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee. I teach about 100 days a year for K2 around the U.S. and Canada. I also have served as the tech editor of the CPA Practice Advisor, and I'm one of the primary authors of the CPA Firm Ops and Tech Survey. We just finished our 3rd year with the survey, and this year I think we had 281 participants with it. So I'm a recovering auditor like many of you, and I've been a CPA firm tech manager. If you have questions or if there's anything I can do to help, my contact information is on the bottom of the slide, and so you see that there. I will be out, unfortunately, all of this week and next week, so if you call that number, you won't hear back from me immediately. It doesn't mean that I don't love you. It just means that I'm on the road and I'm otherwise roving around and doing things. Okay. So first off, our topic today again is the CPA Firm Ops and Tech Survey. And this is a survey that Randy Johnston that I work with and Leslie Garrett came up with about 3 or 4 years ago. And their idea was that Randy has, of course, always been a consultant to the profession, and he's one of the preeminent CPA firm tech consultants out there. And then Leslie does marketing consulting. And there were questions Leslie had in her PhD marketing program at the University of Minnesota that she couldn't answer for her clients that were accounting firms and those that were, again, other technology companies. So they decided to get together and to create the survey. Randy graciously brought me into the process, and I do most of the analysis on this. Now the good news for all of you is that now if you want to get a copy of the survey, you can get last year's survey. It's available for purchase for $495 from CPA Trendlines. So you just go to the CPA Trendlines store, and you'll be able to see that. You also, if you're interested, can participate in the survey for next year. If you're interested in doing that, what you can do is just jump in, and there's a link in the lower right corner of the screen. It's bit.ly/AFOT4. Okay, bit.ly/AFOT4, all lowercase. And if you'll participate in this year's survey, then when we're finished doing the analysis sometime in first or second quarter, we'll be pleased to send you a copy of the survey. So a PDF copy that you can work with and that you can use, and you can read the whole thing. This is a very abbreviated version of the survey, and so we'll go ahead and walk through this. But again, this thing's a 200-page tome, and it's got all kinds of information in here that you could use to help you do what you need to do. Okay. Our presentation is going to start out by us talking about the survey itself and some of the demographics and respondents. We'll then go through some of the major finding sections. We won't go through all of these 7 sections. The 7 sections you see listed on the slide now are the ones listed in the text. In the book. However, we'll go through some of the major ones, and we're going to leave some of the stuff that we don't go through, just so there's a reason for you to go through the survey itself. Again, we have an hour together, and literally I could do an all-day class on the seminar on this thing if we really wanted to. So we'll go through here. Now, it's just starting out with the survey. This is 86 questions, and so it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to take the survey. We ask you questions like, what are your top 3 concerns about managing your firm? What are your top tech concerns? What operating systems your primary one you use on laptops, desktops? How often do you replace laptops and desktops? What software do you use for various things? And a number of other things like that. So it's a very detailed survey. This is not one of those things you get, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, okay? And because of that, we have just a treasure trove of data that we can go through and turn into and kind of give you some trends on the industry. You also can see that we're focused on the firms and their relationships with technology as part of their process. We didn't focus on HR, management practices, or how much each partner makes, okay? Because there are other surveys out there. Mark Rosenberg's survey is really good on how much people make. Jennifer Wilson, I believe, does some, and Boomer both do some HR surveys. There are a lot of other surveys out there, and so we decided we wanted to focus almost exclusively on technology, and so we will. Now, let's go ahead and our next thing we've got then. You can see that our responses were gathered online in the 4th quarter of 2015. So approximately a year ago is when we went through and did that. Finally in here, we invited firms to join through quite a few different ways. So we invited them to join through print, online, email, social media, and a number of other fashions. The respondents again did get the PDF copy of the book, and they can go through and do it. Now there were 5 major surveys to this: Docket, iChannel, ProStaff, Sage Accountant Solutions, and XCM. And so they actually had some ads in the book that was distributed to participants. So you'll see those in there. All right, so we'll start on this section by looking at the respondents. And actually, you know what, Div, this is probably about as good of a time as any to go in and to do our first polling question. So Div, if you'll go ahead and launch the first poll, that'll be great. And then we can just go through and work through it.
Okay, sounds great.
Is the volume doing better for you all? I see a question where somebody was having some issues. I'm looking at the levels and they look okay.
Well, sounds pretty good to me, but if folks out there are having an issue hearing Brian, just let us know under the questions, and Brian can see that over there. All right, so I've just gone ahead and launched the first poll question. The question is, how large is your firm, excluding partners? So if you could please go ahead and select one of the following options and then make sure to click the submit button so that your vote is counted. Reminder that voting in all of the poll questions is required in order to earn CPE credit for attendance today. And so we'll take about 10 to 15 more seconds for people to go ahead and get their vote in. Okay, any last voters, please go ahead and submit now. All right, going once, going twice, and sold. Okay, Brian, so we've got
very good.
About a third are sole practitioners, about a third between 1 and 10 staff.
Okay, and I see we've got 12% that have 11 to 50, and then we got 18% that are not in public accounting. And that's what happens sometimes with free CPE, but it, you know, we're quite pleased to be able to present this to you all today. Okay, so thank you for doing that, Div. Appreciate it. And what we're going to so let's go ahead and close that out and go back to our presentation. And so our survey, we had 281 firms from 46 states. I've got a map on here. I have bounds out there for those in the states that are not highlighted. So if you're in one of those states, please participate. It's somewhat depressing to do a national survey when not everybody, you don't get people to participate. That having been said, we had more than 3 times the number of firms that are needed for it to retain statistical significance. So we think it's a reliable survey. We did stratify the firms into 4 size groups. We classified them as sole practitioners, 1 to 10 employees excluding partners, 11 to 50 employees, and 51 and up employees. And so by doing this, you know, the way we're thinking about this is that the solo practitioner has 1 set of management challenges. Once you start having employees up to about 10, there's a different set. And then when we start getting bigger, we start having to deal with other partners, and then many times we have to deal with multiple offices, multiple practice areas, and other things like that. So we wanted to stratify the answers because we felt that what was good for those 4 different groups was quite different. So that's what we did. Now this is our map. You can see the red dots on the screen represent the locations of the actual firms that completed it. So as I'm looking at this, I need some help from some of you out here in a few states. I think we've got Idaho, New Mexico, Mississippi, Maine, and I see it looks like Rhode Island may not be in there as well. So I guess that'd be 5. But again, I need you guys in those states. If y'all could help me out and take this year's survey, I surely would appreciate it. Anyway, we also had a number of participants that we screened out that were from Canada and other countries. It's not that we're opposed to them participating, but the issues you have in public accounting and what public accounting is quite different in other countries. So you can see that this is a comparison by firm size of the number of firms that filled it out. We came down a little bit, but mostly was in the practitioners, which is probably not a bad thing. We probably oversampled solo practitioners in the first 2 years, and now we've cut it back a little bit, and so it's a little more relevant, we think. This shows you by size group what percentage we're in the different groups, and so that's kind of our comparison. We even have a chart with this on here. What a deal, okay? So anyway, we're quite happy with how the survey came out. Now, our first section we're going to look at is going to be practice management. And in this section, we asked quite a few different things. The first question we asked in here was, what services does your firm offer? Now, you'll notice that the percentage of firms offering these services went up, and on all the way across the board. And this is the first year I've ever seen that. And I think part of that is that by filtering out the very high mix of solo practitioners we had in the prior year, we ended up with more firms that were offering more services. Hence, our overall percentage doing different services actually increased. If we move on to our next slide, this is the detailed information, and hopefully you guys can see that okay on your side. But what I'd like to show you is that, as you'd expect, 0% of the solo practitioners are doing audits, okay? And as a former solo practitioner and a former auditor, knowing the stuff you have to do to get through a peer review, that's probably good for you, your peer reviewer, and everybody else, okay? It's not that solo practitioners don't have the technical competence to do it, it's just that you don't have enough people to do the review processes and things like that. You'll notice that small firms even are only at about 18% that we're doing audits, and so that's in here. And then you can see that the mid-size and the large firms, almost all large firms do auditing. You can see on the business consulting side, we have those numbers that again increase as we go across. What's interesting is when we go down and look at payroll, the payroll on solo practitioners is fairly close to what you have for large firms. So even though they've got quite a few people who've got that, we see tax planning and tax being the primary services along with accounting and bookkeeping, and that's what we kind of expected. So it actually worked out very nicely. You'll also notice that technology services were between 20 and 30% for all. Now that doesn't mean that there's not a strategy if you decide you want to do tech services. I can tell you that I started out trying to be just a general solo practitioner, just trying to run my own business, and then after a while I actually set up where I had relationships with 4 or 5 accounting firms, and I did their tech consulting work. And then I agreed to not solicit any of their clients to do any of the accounting work. So it worked out very nicely for us because I could partner up with some of those small mid-sized firms that didn't have that specialty, and that way they could stay away from that area where they didn't feel like they were competent and they were concerned about the liability. So it worked out pretty nicely for me. Okay, our next demographic question we have is going to be, how many partners do you have in your firm? And so for that question, and this should come across here forward in just a second, sometimes we get the hamster wheel of death, that spinning circle in Windows, and so hopefully this will come across in a second. And now it's come across. Okay, and so you can see that we have some answers in here, but this kind of shows you the size of the firms. So, in the large firms, notice that 26% or more had 20 partners or more, so they're pretty good sized firms. Now, getting out of the demographics and getting into the detail and the weeds, what you can see, our next question is going to be, please list the top three challenges of managing your firm. And so as we go through and look at this, what I'd like you to see is that attracting new clients has decreased over the 3-year trend. You can see that we have a 3-year trend graph on here. And notice that attracting new clients, while it is almost the most important one on here, it's the second most important, notice that it has decreased significantly. Our number one issue that's a challenge for firms is going to be recruiting and retention. And any of you that are in small firms, mid-sized firms, and even large firms know that this is the problem that a lot of people are having. The millennials are generally hardworking, but they're also quite a bit more entrepreneurial and than my generation was, Gen X, because many of them are willing to just go start their practice having not done it before. And so that's an interesting trend that we've seen with this. Notice that managing workflow is number 3, and by using an integrated system like the Power Practice system Div described, you can control engagements and understand what the status is on all of them. In particular, the Power Practice system and other integrated systems like it make it quite a bit easier to let the technology do work instead of you doing the work of keying information in and so forth. So that's what we basically have. Notice also that for the larger firms in particular, driving implementing change is a challenge. And then, of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't include the practice improvement and cost savings. You know, CPA still stands for cheapest price available in most places that I've heard of. As we look at the top 3 challenges of managing your firm by firm size, notice that for large firms, again, it's recruiting and retention number 1, and number 1, by the way, by a very wide margin. You know, the next closest thing for large firms is going to be implementing change, which is at about 50% versus 63.4 for recruiting retention. If we look at small firms now, which is the majority of you on the call, what you'll see is that number 1 is managing workflow. Now, we've seen workflow systems like XCM and ProSystem FX Workstream and Office Tools Pro and other ones like that in the space for some time. What's happening with this is the big companies, you know, the Fortune 500 companies, use SAP and Oracle and other systems like that in order to automate their processes back in the 90s. And this kind of stuff, you know, the same kind of tracking you do with UPS package tracking when you're tracking things through a process with automated rules and so forth, that kind of stuff is filtering its way down to smaller firms. And so this is something that, again, the large firms started embracing, you know, 2005-ish. The mid-sized firms got into in earnest about 2008, 2009, and now it's making its way down to small firms. And so that's the difference here you've got. As you'd expect, again, attracting new clients is ranking pretty high. Now, what I found interesting was that for the solo practitioner, the understanding, identifying the tech options, and staying informed about current technology were the number 1 or number 2 and number 3 things after attracting new clients. One of the things I'm going to say to all of you that are solo practitioners, which is 31% of our audience today, is that when we get to the number of monitors people have on their desks, there is a majority of the solo practitioners that have a single monitor on their desk. Okay. Now, if that is a very large 34-inch widescreen curved monitor that has a surface area about the size of a drive-in movie theater from the 1950s, that's probably okay. But you may need to go in and add additional monitors so you have enough screen real estate so that you don't have to print everything out to work on it. And that's very normal because a lot of solo practitioners haven't been in somebody else's accounting office except to you know, just go in and see their friend, or except to go in and have a meeting where you're taking over on a client. Because of that, we find that sometimes they're behind on technology. So the good news is we have K2 that I work with does webinars, and we have a lot of other places where we can keep you up to date on things. We actually do almost every month a 4-hour CPE course called Tech Update. All right, so our next question is, where do you get your new clients? And as you'd expect, referrals from current clients is what ranks as the highest, and that's actually increasing as opposed to decreasing. Notice that referrals from other professionals are the next piece across here. What's important, I think, to acknowledge in all of this is that nobody gets around this world alone. And I will tell you that when I started my practice in 2002, one of the things that I learned was that I didn't have my contacts weren't nearly as good as I thought they were. And I will tell you that by doing right by people trying to start out, that can pay huge dividends in the long term. What I'd like to also point out to you is that internet search engines and social networking are around 22% as places where firms get new clients. Now, I'm going to suggest that the internet search engines, the effect of it is probably much higher than you realize, and I'm also going to suggest that the social networking effect is probably about right. So as you look at this, I think the internet search engines, you know, the search engines and so forth, that's the new Google. I think you need to have a strategy for that no matter what size your firm is. Okay, the next one, which of the following channels bring your firm's new clients? And this kind of shows you that, again, referrals from current clients and other professionals are where everything falls out. Notice that even on a comparative basis, there's nothing really even close to it in our chart. Now, we also asked our participants, what percentage of your time do you spend on different tasks? Notice that your large firm practitioners said that they spent more time on business management and responding to email as well as evaluating software. Notice in the large firms, it was over 50% for those three items. Notice they only had 17% performing client services. Notice also when we get over to sole practitioners, 60% of them, or almost 61% of their time was spent performing client services. Thankfully, our solo practitioners get a little bit extra vacation time. Notice that our big firm practitioners take about 5% off, and the solo practitioners take about 7% off. Okay, so sounds like a pretty good deal to me. All right, so our next section then is going to be some stuff on technology management. And so, Div, why don't you go ahead and do the next polling question?
Okay, sounds great. So, attendees, you should see the second poll question open up in just a second here. The question is, do you use a suite of applications in your practice? And then there are 4 choices for yes, or a 5th one of something else. So if you could go ahead and please select the option that matches your firm the most, and then make sure to click the submit button. Just a reminder again that voting in all of the questions is required in order to earn CPE today.
And these stats coming in are pretty interesting. Right now, the stats look like we've got about 40%, hovering around 40%, are using something besides one of these 4 suites, which I find interesting. I suspect that Drake is a significant player in that space, but I don't know.
All right, so we'll take about 10 more seconds here. Just about everyone has voted, but 10 more seconds for the stragglers. So please go ahead and click submit with your choice as soon as you can here. All right, going once, going twice. Okay, so here we are in terms of the presentation, and as you said before, Brian, we're seeing about 40% something else, and I suspect some of those are also no's, and then a pretty even split between CCH Thompson and AccountantsWorld, Intuit with a larger chunk of the pie.
Yeah, and that's what you'd expect. I mean, I track the Intuit SEC filings and other things, and Intuit has about 1.2 million companies on QuickBooks Online. However, they have about 2.5 million seats sold of QuickBooks Desktop. So while it may, while we hear a lot about cloud, the profession has been a little bit slow to go in and do the adoption. So anyway, we'll get out there though. Now, what I'd like you to see next is how our client tax return delivered. This is something that can get you in trouble, people. The most popular ways they're delivered are paper copy at the office, paper via U.S. mail. You can send things via portal. However, emailing tax returns, if you don't have any kind of encryption applied to it through a third-party utility, emailing tax returns is a problem. And in here, 21% of the solo practitioners said that they email 60% of their tax returns to clients. Now, you need to talk to your malpractice carrier about this. But as we look at this is something that is very concerning to me. Okay, I have often said in seminars that I believe that practitioners are putting their reputation and their livelihood at risk by emailing tax returns directly to end users, just because when you send something via email, it's not much different. We're at about the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther nailing the theses to the front door of the church in, I think it was 1517. And if you think about that, the stuff you email to people outside your organization, it should be just as public as Martin Luther's theses he named to the front door of his church, because the law looks at email the same way it looks at a postcard, where you can look at it, your spouse can look at it, your nosy neighbor can look at it, the postman can read it, and so you just need to be very careful with email, because it's a potential way for information to leak out and for some of this identity theft to happen. Okay, so that's what we have now. If we look at this, we've got some of the stats on how these things are delivered. The way we came up with with those percentages is, again, we just went through and summed the percentages that, where they sent whatever percent they sent. So you have those stats. You can go through that one. Now in our next one, so in the first one, this is email. The second one, this is the percentages that we're using some kind of web delivery. And so a great example of a web delivery portal would be the AccountantsWorld Power Practice Suite. They actually have the Cloud Cabinet application that you can use. So anyway, that'll work nicely. Now, I've got a question here. When delivering sensitive information, could we use virtual storage systems like Mega.nz or WeTransfer? Well, actually, no, especially on Mega, because there are some regulations under Internal Revenue Code section 7216 that say that information, especially the Social Security number, can't leave the U.S. without some consent on the part of the client. Furthermore, Social Security number can't leave, has to be masked whenever it's outside the U.S. So to say something, I'm going to say that you're creating trouble for yourself if you're not using something that's hosted inside the U.S. like the Accounting Power Practice, the AccountantsWorld Power Practice Suite, CCH and Thompson's portals, ShareFile, something like that. You want to make sure that all your stuff is on U.S.-based servers. Div, I know that your product has been in the U.S. because I've met with you as well as the two doctors Bonsali that are the principals behind the operation, and we've specifically been through in detail to be sure that this stuff's in the U.S. you can comply with that law. By the way, that sending that data outside the country is actually a felony if people decide to prosecute it. Next question. How does your firm communicate with clients and prospects? Notice email, phone, face-to-face, postal, tech, web portal, website. The thing I want you to see here is that the good news is web portals have gone up. Text has gone up. When it comes to text, I want you to think about that, about how you're archiving those text messages. Just like you need to have an archival strategy for just about any other kind of paper or business documentation you have, we really think you ought to have a strategy for text messages. This is a breakout by firm size. I'm not going to go in a whole lot of detail on it, but I just want to let you know that we have that. Notice, well, out of this one, the thing that I find interesting is that only 23% of solo practitioners have some kind of web portal, and that's something you really need to remedy in here. I also want to call out the social network use down here toward the bottom because you need to know that if you send something to somebody over Facebook instant messaging or over, frankly, most social networks, that information is not confidential. It's actually mined for data out. They might the social networks mine data out of there and they create more and more on your profile on it. So I really believe it could be a professional ethics violation to use Facebook chat to send somebody their tax return. Anyway, but looking at this, that's what you have across here. All right, to use web portals, and you can see that percentage has steadily increased, and now this year almost 74% were using web portals, which is a good thing. Okay, the next thing, do we use virtual server technology? This is something that's kind of a techie thing, but what's happening in the server world is we're moving to where instead of installing the hardware directly on the computer, so that if the computer has a problem and we need to restore our backups, we have to reconfigure the whole server to make it work. Instead, we're doing what's called virtualizing it. And the best way of describing what virtualization is, it's kind of like uncoupling the operating system from the physical hardware. Just like with shipping containers, we've been able to take a freight container and uncouple it from the thing that makes it go from place to place, like a ship, like a train, like a truck. So by having shipping containers, we don't have to pack and unpack that stuff all the time, like the way they did in some of those movies from the 40s, 50s, like on the waterfront and so forth. So by having shipping containers, it makes it possible for us to switch from one box to one carrier to another and go through there. These virtual server technologies do basically the same thing for the operating systems. That way, if lightning strikes your server, you just take your backup virtual machines, run them on a new server with minimal configuration and the virtualization software, and it makes it quite a bit easier to get up in a more quick fashion. In fact, you can even take those virtual machines and run them in the cloud on Azure or on Microsoft, on the Microsoft Cloud, or on Amazon Web Services. Okay, next thing, hardware and software. So in our next item, how often do you change out your desktop computers? And I'd like you to see that every 3 years is the most popular. Every 4 years is next most popular. Unfortunately, there's another group, which is the biggest percentage, of as needed and varies. Okay, I'm going to tell you that I think as soon as you buy your computer, you ought to have a plan for when you're going to replace it. Okay, the current computer I'm speaking off of now, I purchased in December of last year. It was my Christmas present to myself from Section 179. It's a Microsoft Surface Book, nice laptop, and I plan to use it for 2 years. So its replacement will be purchased in December of 2017. So I know I'm going to have this, and we're going to roll forward through this. But what I want you to see now by firm size, you can see that again, for solo practitioners, it's very normal for them to not really have much of a plan. Many of them plan to keep their computer for 5 years. Now, one of the participants actually raises a very good point. As we use more cloud-based services, the cycle time on IT equipment is lengthening, and that's what you'd expect, because if you're running the apps on the local PC, where all the programs are on the local PC as well, what's happening is you're using the PC as a normal global, as a terminal almost, and so you're sending mouse movements and typing to the remote computer. The remote computer then is streaming a desktop back to you the same way you'd stream a Netflix movie, except it's in interactive if you're going through this. Okay, what hardware should people use with cloud-based services? I'm going to tell you that this is what I think you ought to have for. If you're doing stuff on the workstations. For cloud services, we'll address that in the question period toward the end. The first thing I'm going to say is I think you need to have a Intel i5 or i7 or Xeon processor, and it needs to be 5th through 7th gen. The 5th gen processors are an older proven technology. They'll work great with Windows 7 if you're still on Windows 7. The 6th gen processors are that's what I've got on my Surface Book that was new in late 2015. That's what most of you are probably going to get. It's also important to get that if you're planning on running Windows 7 or Windows 8, because as you'll see on the next slide, the 7th gen processors, the Kaby Lake ones, came out in late 2016, and those are only supported on Windows 10. Now, I'd like to show you that if you look at the model numbers on these, you can see if you look at the technical details on these different kinds of processors, you can see that it's i5-7XXX or i7-7XXX. That's 7th gen, as you might expect. For 5th gen, that first digit is a 5, and for 6th gen, that first digit is a 6. And so what I want you to do is look at the detailed specs for the processor, and if somebody says it's an i5 or an i7, make sure that number is a 5, 6, or a 7, and if that number is a 7, and there aren't many Kaby Lake processors out there now in devices, but I've seen about 20 of them out there and 20 different models, and the challenge you've got there is those will only run Windows 10. It's not supported on Windows 7 or 8.1. Now, other specs, solid state drive, 256 gig or more, 8 gig or more of RAM, and we need you to stick with business grade or workstation grade hardware. So one of the more common mistakes that I see people making is they will buy a home grade laptop or home grade computer desktop instead of buying a business grade laptop. This is something I put together about a year ago. I actually went through all the different lines of hardware that Dell and HP and Lenovo did, and I actually classified all of those into different categories. So you'll notice that for our HP laptops, EliteBook, ProBook, and ZBook, you can also use the Envy and Spectre laptop lines. However, they're gaming hardware. They're going to be more expensive. They're going to be high quality, but they're going to have weird graphics on them, like a picture of some guy in camos holding a big weapon. Okay, I find that that kind of stuff kind of freaks people out that are attending, or they'll have a keyboard that'll have red keys on it, and it looks like something straight out of a horror movie. Okay, so again, I find the aesthetics of the gaming gear is not as good, but it's great hardware if you want to use it. The home grade stuff's over on the right. Now, I had a question earlier, what minimal computer hardware could somebody use with cloud-based services? Potentially, you could use the Chrome box or a Chromebook, as long as you had multiple monitors on it, and just use a remote desktop connection with cloud services. I know some people that use services like AccountantsWorld, they'll actually go in and just use the Chromebook, which is about a $300 laptop with it, and as long as they use the external dongle to have the second display on it, it's on there. I'm surprised to see XPS on the home grade side. Dell XPS is a hard one to classify because it is kind of a gaming machine, but it has been historically targeted there. You could probably put XPS over into the business line, but again, the thing you got to understand with this is that our business grade gear is designed to work 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Our home grade gear is designed to work like 4 hours a day. And they use inconsistent, the cheapest stuff possible, okay? So if you're the kind of person that drives a 30-year-old Yugo, then home grade hardware may be for you, but you should expect the same kind of reliability you'd get for a 30-year-old Yugo. Similarly, if you're the kind of person that drives something fairly new, a fairly new Honda, Toyota, Chevrolet, BMW, whatever you want to do, that kind of stuff is the equivalent of that's going to be business grade. Okay? And I guess now is probably as good a time as any to go ahead and do our next polling question, Div. Okay. So for this one, folks, we just want to ask you what your biggest concern is about closing this year's books, because we've noticed there are a lot of changes out there. There have been some changes to the Mag Media reporting, C Corp partnership due dates, some of the uncertainty in the economy, and this election. Oh Lord, please deliver me from the election. Finding, retaining staff, or information security. And this is actually coming out pretty interesting. Div, looking at are you seeing anything that surprises you?
I would have expected, I would say information security and identity theft is a little higher than I would have expected. Not that I am surprised that's number one right now, which it is, spoiler alert, but I'm surprised that that's up at 40% so far. Are you surprised by that at all?
I'm not particularly surprised. I think we've had some high-profile hacks. One of the things I want to tell you all is that the way AccountantsWorld and a lot of the cloud applications are configured, if you're using a password manager and you have a strong password to log into there, the cloud stuff can be more secure than the on-premises stuff, okay? Especially on-premises stuff where you don't have a security pro helping you out. So, Div and the AccountantsWorld people, they actually have set up failover on their Amazon Web Services account. And so when you have downtime, like happened a while back, they actually have 2 instances of their stuff so that you can get to it quite a bit better. So again, they've had all kinds of there are all kinds of issues that can strike people, but I want you to know that I feel very good about what the cloud companies are doing with information security, and again, especially those affecting the profession. I know of no instance where a practitioner class application has ever had a single breach of a single record of information. We can't say that for the consumer grade stuff, and we can't say that for a lot of other things. But I'm not aware of any of the major tax software companies or any of the practitioner class applications ever having a single breach of a single record of information. And if I'm wrong, please tell me. But I've looked pretty hard for that, and I've not found any situation where that's happened.
All right, we just a reminder to people, we've got about 5 to 10 seconds left here on the poll, so if you haven't voted yet, please go ahead and do so, and then I'll close it out in just a couple of seconds here. All right, here we go. So just to close the loop on this, we ended up at 40%, Brian, on information security and identity theft, and 20% each on changes to C Corp and uncertainty in the economy.
Yeah, and that's what you'd expect. I mean, we've, you know, I'm not surprised at all by the information security. The good news is some of these deadline changes, like the W-2 deadline and then delaying some of the refunds, that's some really good thinking about by the IRS to try to push some of those deadlines up, so that we hopefully don't have that problem as much as we have in years past. Okay, next question. How often do you cycle or replace your notebook computers? And you can see that every 3 years is the most popular. I will tell you that even with the business grade laptops that I buy, you know, when I buy a home grade laptop, 2 years is about all I can get out of it, maybe 2.5. I can usually get many more years than that out of a business grade laptop. You know, again, in my world, business grade laptops live in my office for about 3 or 4 years, and then they become backup laptops or were used for other things. And so, for example, my son is now using the laptop that I got in 2010. He's using that as his laptop. Now, it's a heavy one, but it's still working great, you know, 6 years later. So this shows you this by firm size. Now, when we look at some of the other things, notice that Microsoft's got their Surface line, and again, this Surface Book in the middle is what I currently have. These are expensive premium devices, but I want you to see that you know, there's no substitute for buying good hardware. All right, so how many monitors do you have at your office? Notice that the highest percentage had 2, some have 3, and notice that the prevalence of 3 has gone up significantly. The percentage that have 1 has gone down significantly. However, when I look at my my stats for the solos, I'd like you to see that 36% of solos have 1 monitor, okay? And so if you're one of those 36%, I don't think you're living right if you have 1 monitor, unless it's a very, 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 very large monitor, okay? And when I say by that is probably something really, really big. As you're looking at this next slide, notice that we have a lot of options in here. We are seeing people switch to these 34-inch widescreens. Here is a picture of Randy that I work with at the Consumer Electronics Show in 2015. This is one of those 34-inch monitors, and I wanted to get the picture with Randy in there, and he's standing on the back side of that monitor because it is massive. So again, get good quality monitors. This one I think is about $800 to $1,000. Okay, but you know, again, life is too short for cheap gear. Get the right hardware. Do what you need to do. Okay, what word processing software are you on? Notice that 36% are on Office 2013, 39% are on Office 2010, and 12% are on Office 365. Okay, so anyway, we have that. Question, are you okay with the 34-inch widescreen 1080 compared to the 1440? No, I think you ought to go with the 1440 if it's your sole monitor. 1080 monitors that size generally don't have the detail that you'd hope you would. Now, there are some concerns about the Office 365 updates. For example, if you're on Office 365 where you rent your copy of Microsoft Office from Microsoft, then you should be on Office 2016 by now. There's some things on how their stuff updates. I don't have time to go through those out of sake of time, but I want to let you know that it's important that you pay attention to that, and we've got enough notes in here we should be able to follow it. Now, 1040 scanning, number 1 in this category is going to be CCH scan at about 20%. Most of you are not doing this. Number 2 is going to be the Docket product out of Canada. That's part of their document management system. And then the Copanion Gruntworks is in here at 2.6%. This is something we're seeing a lot of firms having success with, and I hope you'll investigate that as you're going forward. Now, our next thing we've got then is going to be our document management system. Which document management system are you using? Notice that File Cabinet CS is fairly popular, as is Docket and CCH Document. Workflow software. Looking at all of these, what the big thing to see here is that the percentage that are considering workflow is about 25%. And notice that the trend on that, we are not considering any kind of workflow. That's all the way down to just 20% this year, where it was over 50% in the past. So there's been a significant decrease there. And so workflows, again, is a trend that we're looking at. This is the breakdown by firm size. As you'd expect, the solo practitioners, because it's just them, they can run their practice on a yellow pad and it's okay. As we look at small, mid-sized, and large firms, though, you'll notice that the small firms tend to use the Practice CS application, which by strict definition, if you're using the projects module in it, then it'll help you manage the projects okay. But realistically, it's not as robust as what we have, let's say, in a docket or what we have in XCM or the CCH Access Workstream product, okay? And because XCM was an early mover in this, you'll notice that they have 30% of the large firms and 21% of the mid-sized firms, and they're the clear leader in those segments. All right, now please identify your firm's tax software. And looking at this, I'd like you to see that by firm size. Notice that the different kinds of products mix out quite differently. Notice that there were 0% of the solo practitioners that were using Pro System FX Tax from CCH, and 72% of the large firms that were using it. Conversely, notice that 0% of the large firms are using Drake, and 25% of the solos were using it. So, again, I think you ought to use the right product for your practice. But I've seen more people switching tax software in the last 3 years than I've seen in the previous 20 years that I had in the profession before that. People generally switch tax software about as often as they switch major world religions. So, Buddhism to Shintoism, or, Christianity to Judaism, or something like that. Okay, so as we're thinking about this, it's a pretty big deal. Now, engagement management software, as you'd expect, Pro System FX Engagement is doing quite well in the mid and large firms, and then a lot of the smaller firms aren't using it. Again, we see this more often in the audit spec. For write-up and bookkeeping, notice that QuickBooks is quite prevalent in here. I'm not sure that's the right choice for everybody, and I think it's unfortunate. But when we look at this, notice you've got the various things in here. Now, I'd like you to also see that when we start looking at the cloud products, we hear a lot about Xero, but I'd like to point out to you that in North America, Xero is no better than 4th or 5th place in this, and these are all, I've got my sources over there in the right column. These are numbers that I mine out of the different investor presentations and so forth that all these companies give. And so I think it's important to point out that, again, QuickBooks Online is doing well, but even QuickBooks Online, where you've got 1.1 million users, you've got about 2.5 million users of QuickBooks Desktop at this point. And so what this means is you're probably around 2 to 1, 2 to 1 in favor of QuickBooks Desktop versus QuickBooks Online, and that's an important thing to be aware of. I think you need to look at some of the alternatives out there, and again, you need to get something that gives you the control that you need over the application. Practice management, time and billing software. One more thing about the QuickBooks Online stuff over here. Notice that last one down at the bottom, QuickBooks Self-Employed, where they had 85,000 users on that. Okay. One of the things you need to know is that, first off, they've built in a tool. What all these products do is they pull in the transactions from the bank statements and from the credit cards. And on the QuickBooks Self-Employed product, they also frequently market it with TurboTax. Okay, that could, of course, be problematic for our accounting professionals, and so I just want to let you know about that, because I'm not opposed to you using it with your clients, but you just need to know that Intuit has historically marketed directly to end users, and so if you put clients on there, we don't know if they're going to market TurboTax to them or not, because Intuit's got this kind of have this two sides to their house. They have the practitioner side, that's the certain Pro Series, and then they have the do-it-yourself side, which is TurboTax. And so I just want you to be careful as you're looking at that particular product, because I've got some privacy concerns with respect to that. Okay. All right, so I've got, let's see, we got a couple of minutes here. Practice management, time and billing. Here's some stuff on payroll. Notice that this is a concern for a lot of people because the Creative Solutions accounting product is being, they're basically not doing the payroll tables for 2017. So if you're on the Creative Solutions accounting product, especially for payroll, you need to know that they're going to stop all support on that product about May 1st next year. And notice that it was used in 7% of the firms as of this time last year. So I just want you to be aware of that. And again, if you're on that CSA, Creative Solutions Accounting product, or Payroll CS, or Write-Up CS, I want you to know that you're going to have to get off that product in short order. And if you haven't thought about things, I would encourage you to check some other stuff out. Here's research, here's client accounting systems. Beg pardon? Yeah, and don't forget, notice that you can see AccountantsWorld over here. I will tell you that I think AccountantsWorld is a great solution for you to look at, and I'm not aware of, I think it's one of the most feature-rich applications in the cloud accounting space, and it's got, it is also probably the most feature-rich application as far as the cloud practitioner class applications, okay? Again, for the ones that are designed just for practitioners, okay? So looking at that now, firm's internal accounting system, what remote access do you offer? Okay, communicate. We're gonna go through some of these kind of quick just for time purposes. Let's see, how likely are you to implement a web-hosted or cloud-based software in the next 2 years? Notice that solo practitioners say they already do more often than the large ones in here. What I want you to understand as you're looking at this is that if you have 10 or fewer people at your office, it's probably more important for you to migrate toward the cloud simply because you probably don't have enough staff people to have your own in-house network. So I would encourage you to look at cloud applications if you're in that small segment because it makes things quite a bit more reliable for you. This also breaks out some of the other stats in comparing to previous years. Now our next one, do you have an annual per person tech budget? Notice 86% of firms don't have one, and those that do, if you consider tech the way I do, that if it has a plug or it plugs in the wall, or if it has data that plugs into it, or if it communicates with the outside world, basically anything that has an on-off switch is technology, including the related communication and the related software purchases and so forth. If you think about that, I think you're going to find that you're hard-pressed to do that for 6,000. Okay. All right, so I've got some other stats in here, but let's just go ahead and do our last polling question, Dev, and then we'll now, if you're interested in buying the survey, you can buy it at cpatrendlines.com. What I'd like to also show you is that if you're interested in taking the survey, you can go to bit.ly/AFOT4. That's a link that I set up that points to our survey. If you'll just go to that link, you can take the survey. It'll take you about an hour, and then when we're finished with it, you'll be able to take it, you'll be able to pick it up and take it and have the 200-page analysis when it comes out second quarter next year. So, Deb, if you'll go ahead and launch our last polling question.
Sure will. So I'll go ahead and launch this polling question, and then we'll have a couple of closing slides here. So the final poll question, do you currently use Thomson Reuters Creative Solutions Accounting? Yes for bookkeeping and payroll, yes for payroll only, yes for bookkeeping only, or no, I do not. So if you could please go ahead and submit your vote here, and we'll give another 15-20 seconds. And just a reminder, this is the final one of the 4 required polling questions today, so please make sure to fill this out to make sure you get CP credit for your attendance. And we'll take
if you do have any questions,
there.
if you do have any questions, go ahead and pop them in the window, and we can address them. I think we've addressed all the ones that have been asked, one way or the other.
All right, 5 seconds to go here on the poll, so please click submit if you haven't already. Okay, here we go. Okay, Brian, so 92% said no, I do not. 6% use it for both bookkeeping and payroll.
Yeah, and that 6%, the 6% that are using it for bookkeeping and payroll and the 1% that are using it for payroll only, you got to do something quick, okay, because there will be no 2017 payroll tax tables for this product, Okay, even though they're supporting it through May 1st, there are no payroll tax tables for this product. So I encourage you to, now it doesn't affect the engagement CS product, but as far as the payroll stuff goes, you need to look at other things. I think you need to look at AccountantsWorld. I think you may want to look at some other solutions as well too. But you're behind the 8 ball if you're in that small minority to have this. Okay, is emailing a PDF file secure? No. I'm going to make that easy. It's possible for you to make an email, a PDF secure by putting a strong password on it. And when I say that, a 17-character password. But inevitably, if you're sending that to a client, it's a problem. And I can go into that, Bob. I can go into that in detail with you if you want to talk about it. But it's generally, I often tell people just to get the point across that they will go to hell if they email somebody a PDF of their tax return. And that seems to register with them. Okay, next one. When it comes to Xero, do you recommend something more robust, or is there another concern with it? No, I don't have specific concerns with Xero. It's just that the problems that we've had with Xero are that they have not adjusted their stuff to American business practices. See, U.S. companies have a hard time making their software do what it needs to do outside the U.S. Because they don't support value-added tax. Companies outside the country have value-added tax as a heavy component, and by switching back, by coming in the U.S., we've got that. Okay. All right. Let's see what else. Is Thomson Reuters new ACS, does that have 2017 payroll? That's correct. If you switch to ACS, accounting CS, not CSA, but accounting CS, if you switch to that, it has payroll. Okay. What if you use ShareFile to send tax returns? That's how I'd send it. I mean, that's how I send tax returns online. But again, you could also use the cloud cabinet from AccountantsWorld and other things. Intact could be used as well, although Intact is, I'm not sure about the payroll integration they've got with Intact, Mike. So that's the concern there, especially for after-the-fact payroll. I'm not sure you can do after-the-fact payroll with Intact. Do I see a lot of people using FreshBooks Wave and Xero for time and billing? I see quite a bit with this. I talk to a lot of people about having a strategy for shoebox people. If somebody comes to your firm, you should have a strategy. It may be AccountantsWorld, it may be QBO, it may be other things, but you need to have a strategy for how you want your clients to keep their books so that your firm is familiar with how to work with them. And and you should have an opinion. I like what AccountantsWorld has done with the "Don't Do It Yourself" campaign, because again, if you would cut your own hair or do your own dental fillings, then that's probably a good idea for your clients. Okay, I will tell you, one time I had a tax client I was talking to, and they said, hey, my hairdresser said I could cut that, and so I reached in my desk drawer, got out a pair of scissors, and I said, well, let's cut your hair and talk about that. And they recoiled in fear as if I would cut their hair. And I think I made the point there that we need to make sure that we're doing this. Okay. Anyway, yeah, shoebox accounting. Yeah, that's a definite teaching opportunity, and we do some stuff through K2 with that. Okay. All right, Div, I'm 2 minutes over. You want me to keep taking questions, or what do you want to do?
Well, let me go ahead and, if you don't mind, I'll present my closing slide, and then we'll keep it open for questions, and if you don't mind sticking around for a couple of minutes after that if other questions come through.
That's Superman. Thank you so much for the opportunity, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your information today. And as I mentioned, if you have other questions for Brian, please stick around here, and we will make sure that can get answered as well. So let me go ahead and just bring the presentation back to myself here. Okay. Brian, are you seeing my my Stop the Insanity slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great.
We've got it, and we definitely need to stop the insanity.
So next week, a week from today at 2 p.m. Eastern, we're presenting a really special webinar. This is the only time all year we're going to be doing this. Jim Szynski, CPA, he's a working CPA in public practice, as so many of you are, and he's used one of the solutions that Brian had talked about a little bit and expressed some concerns about. He's presenting a webinar. This isn't going to be AccountantsWorld talking. This is going to be Jim Szynski, CPA, speaking. Stop the Insanity, How I Regain Control of My Accounting Firm. Jim used to experience a lot of the issues that probably many of you do, too many tax returns being put on extension, a lot of hours being wasted on menial or manual tasks, clients creating errors when they do bookkeeping work, and taking on clients who don't match their goals or expertise. So if those things apply to you, they used to apply to Jim as well. And he figured out some processes and some tools to use to be able to implement a better way of managing his practice. And he's seen some amazing transformations within his firm. So I encourage you to go ahead and sign up. We're going to send you the follow-up email to this webinar within the next 24 hours, and that will include a link to go and sign up for Jim's webinar as well. I think it's also one of our questions in the post-webinar survey here. Would you be interested in signing up for that? So if you click on that, we'll get you signed up for that as well. So I strongly encourage you to come in and learn his secrets direct from Jim. He's a really entertaining speaker, has a lot to say. So look forward to seeing you next week. Again, I want to thank Brian for his time today, and I want to thank all of you for attending as well. And if you have any other questions for Brian, please go ahead and shoot them over, and we'll continue to take a look at them. Thanks again for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday.